She's the pushy broad from the Bronx, New York. Follow her voice, a straight dog is nice. She's a pushy broad from the Bronx, oh yeah. Don't be surprised if you wanna listen twice. Make decisions, find the right choice. Know yourself better, find your own voice. It's okay if you need help today, cause everybody needs a little push. From the pushy broad from the Bronx, New York.
Welcome, Transformation Talk Network listeners. My name is Ellen Stewart, and I am the pushy broad from the Bronx. Well, welcome to my show, Recovery Recharged, where we share advice and support from experts in addiction and recovery. You know, the Pushy Broad always has great guests on this show because I believe in bringing resource information to you, being very upfront and telling you like it is, and talking about how great it is to be in recovery. But sometimes we don't have an opportunity to stay in recovery because stuff happens and relapses happen in our life. But it's all about getting better and finding a way to go back onto the path, which is why I've called this show Recovery Recharged. I have a guest on my show today who has a very interesting story to tell, and that story is centered around a book called Every Silver Lining Has a Cloud, and it is on Amazon Books. It's also on Kindle. Please pick it up. I want to introduce to you the author of this book, Scott Stevens. Scott is an experienced writer, a very popular radio and TV guest. He's a conference speaker, and he has demonstrated history working in the health, wellness, and addiction recovery industry. He is also not only the author of this book that we're going to talk about today, Every Silver Lining Has a Cloud, but he is an award-winning author of 5 best-selling books on addiction and recovery. And he is also an alcohologist, and we're going to talk to him about what that means. The Pushy Broad from the Bronx, Recovery Recharge, welcomes my guest, Scott Stevens. Good morning, Scott. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you, Ellen. Good morning to you as well. Thanks for having me.
Good morning. Did I say that right?
Alcohologist, you nailed it.
Alcohologist, right? I nailed it because I didn't nail it in the pre. I nailed it right here. So thank you so much. All right. So I want to go back to this. First of all, I love the title of the book, right? Every Silver Lining Has a Cloud. And that is a very apropos title, especially for your subject matter. Mm-hmm. I want to get right to it because the book talks right from the beginning on what happened to you on October 17th, 2010. So why don't you tell us?
Well, I didn't wake up that morning believing that I was going to go out drinking. I had already had 2.5 years of sobriety after going to treatment and nudge from the judge, handcuffs, jail, that kind of encouragement to stay sober. And I woke up and I was feeling way off. And I did what our knee-jerk reaction is to be a jerk. And I went out and purchased a couple of pints of vodka and started drinking, just like an alcoholic does.
Well, you mentioned also in the book around the beginning of the relapse that you were actually feeling like maybe life was too good to be true because you had some early success about your first book.
I did.
And so you turned around and said, well, wow, man, this is so fantastic. What, I have to celebrate this? What were you thinking?
Well, it's easy to get caught up in the wow, this is fantastic. I've got it nailed. I've got this. And, I let my guard down. Sure, I did. To look at some of the good things that were going on in my life and saying, yeah, it's time to celebrate, but also as a converse to that, with the good stuff that was going on, I was neglecting the important parts of my recovery, the self-care items that help keep me in sobriety. So on one side, yeah, celebrate, and on the other side, yeah, stuff is slipping fast.
So here you are, and you're on October 17th, and it was really a cycle of continuous drinking, correct? Almost as if it was taking you by surprise. Do you think you had, sometimes it becomes like an out of body experience, like we can't believe we're doing this. Did that happen that way for you?
It did. It sure did. And when I look at the cycle of addiction and especially the progressive nature of addiction and substance use disorders, that this disease that I had arrested or put in remission for a while just came back, not as if I picked up or stopped yesterday, not if it continued to progress. So I picked up as if I had never stopped for 2.5 years. The momentum was there with my tolerance, and it was like I could not get enough. I wanted the alcohol more than I wanted my next breath of air.
And that happened in the course of one day. How long did that relapse last for you?
That was about 2 days before I was arrested for once again letting the alcohol do the thinking for me, and I got behind the wheel of a car. I didn't cause a crash. I certainly hurt a lot of people, my family, my mom, my kids, emotionally. But yeah, I did a very stupid thing at the time that at that time blessed. It was a blessing that it stopped at that point.
That you got pulled over when you didn't
Mhm.
hurt anybody physically and you didn't hurt yourself, and it put an end to it because you think it might have gone on otherwise?
Yeah, I have no question, Ellen, that my efforts that I had put into my recovery. At the time, I was attending 12-step meetings through the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd stopped going to meetings, and they tell you to keep coming back, and if you have a slip, if you have a lapse, come on back. I don't know if that would have happened for me. I honestly don't. I know that the disease that I have was doing the thinking for me, and the disease wants nothing to do with sobriety. The disease just wants me to keep feeding it. And I was in that mindset. I'm sure I was. Fortunately, I had the benefit of taking a breath and saying, okay, I'm going to draw some sober breath into my lungs and fix this thing, right this ship this time.
Well, in the book, and I want to talk to something that you mentioned right in the
Yeah.
beginning, and that is, first of all, and I'm very much a part of it, the difference between sobriety and sobriety versus recovery, and then also something called the symptoms of sobriety, because you mentioned that just a few minutes ago. You said
Mhm.
to us that you weren't doing, and there were maybe indications that you didn't realize until you talk about it in this book, that you were headed for a slip, and you call them the symptoms of sobriety. Can you go over some of these things with us?
Sure. The things that I noticed about myself, and again, the benefit of retrospect and being able to study more about what was happening to me. Because when relapse happened to me, I said, I'm a reasonably intelligent guy. Why can't I get this? And I was trying to outthink the disease. And that was the impetus of me studying more about the symptoms of sobriety. For me, the neglecting of the self-care things, the big ones, getting enough sleep, eating well, those things had fallen by the wayside. And to look at that as one of the symptoms of sobriety, that would have been a warning sign to me that I was putting things ahead of my sobriety, and anything you put ahead of it, you're going to lose.
And then also you talked about poor memory recall and confusion, lack of clear thinking. Was that manifesting itself in your life?
Yeah, that and substitute cravings. Yeah, I was very much into my nicotine at that point, and I was definitely smoking more at that time. So I was overcompensating, and part of it goes to the dopamine cycle that I've read up on since then and studied pretty significantly since then. But you don't know what dopamine is at that point. All you know is you need something, and that was my substitute need at that time. So all of those things, the poor memory, oh my God, Ellen, it was a disaster. I would try to read a book and I would be a paragraph later and what did I just read? No retention at all.
And this is before you picked up. And this is something that I need our listeners to remember. Okay. And we want to go into this. You talk about the fact that nearly every alcoholic relapses, which is exactly what you did. So here's the big question, and we all think about it all the time. Do you think that relapse is a part of recovery?
No, doesn't have to be. It is for many people. The stats are pretty ugly, like 9 out of 10 people who quit drinking go back to it before they find permanent long-term sobriety, find recovery. Doesn't have to be part of recovery. It is for many people. I think that the tendency to go back because we glorify, we think of what it did for us, and that draw is magic until we realize what it was doing to us. So, to look at this substance that we were putting in our bodies, all the magic that we attributed to it. Hey, it relieves my stress. Alcoholics and non-alcoholics alike drink for the same reason. It relieves stress. But then there's the big but. This is something that will kill a person with an alcohol use disorder like myself.
You also talk about the difference between lapse and relapse, since we're talking about relapsing and recovery. Can you explain that?
A lapse, a slip. Okay, you went out, you caught yourself right away. That's what would typically be considered a lapse versus a relapse. You're off to the races. You're on a 4 or 5 day, 4 or 5 week bender following a period of sobriety. That is a significant relapse where, again, you've re-engaged those rituals of drinking, whether it's morning drinking or planning your purchases, getting into looking at the emotional part and the mental part of relapse, leading to the physical relapse.
And I think the other important thing for us to all to remember is that whether it's a lapse or a relapse, the moment that you decide that you're going to introduce mood-altering substances into your life, chances are it will immediately be at the level it was when you stopped. You think that's true?
Yeah, absolutely true. It's a chronic, progressive, fatal, and primary disease as far as disease definitions go, but the progressive part is the really scary part. You're not picking up where you left off. You are picking up as if you'd never stopped, and that part of it is a frightening proposition when you look at the fact that I was drinking 2 liters of Jack Daniels every day, taking a pull out of a bottle just to get down the stairs to stave off the shakes. To go back to that so rapidly and still wanting more is one of the frightening parts of this disease.
And you really lay it out in a way that is very matter of fact, but still scary enough, because I know how difficult that situation was for you. I have 38 years clean and sober. I relapsed in my first year, and I relapsed for a short period of time, but it maybe lasted about 3 weeks. And it really almost brought me some very, very serious trouble. And that, gratefully, was the first time. But we do find, especially with the clients that I'm talking to, that in the first year and even 2 years of early sobriety, the chances of relapse are quite great. How much clean time do you have now, Scott?
13 years, but I only get today. You know that.
There you go. One day at a time. All right. I want to shift it a little bit because we want to talk about what happens afterwards. And you finally, and gratefully, you found your way back, which is wonderful. But you outlined some of the feelings we go through when we have done something like this. We talk about guilt, shame, forgiveness, and grief. All right. So pick one of those and focus on that for me and tell me how it affected you personally.
The guilt part really got to me. I grew up with 12 years of Catholic education in a very strict home. And to look at the carnage, my low light reel was pretty ugly. And to look at what happened, it was instant guilt, but it was also pervasive guilt that kept on coming and coming. I wrote in the book a really meaningful passage about what my guilt meant, connecting it to my childhood when I'd go to the top of the stairs and try to connect with my dad on a CB radio, and when that crackled away, then I was left in the loneliest place of America in America. I vowed to myself I would never be that dad to my kids, and here I did that. I did that. So I created that for them. That was my guilt. And to address that, there's a lot of talk therapy that goes on, and to forgive myself and to repackage and reinvent those relationships with my children has been the most rewarding part of this whole recovery journey over the 13 years. But looking at how guilt kept me in a place where I wanted to turn to a substance for relief rather than facing it head on. And I say this in the book, and I mean this with my entire heart. We have to talk about the things we don't talk about. We need to talk about that guilt in order
Exactly.
for get that grip of it off of us.
You say guilt, like the dark side of the moon, it may be out of sight, but it's always there.
Mhm.
And that is something that people deal with for a very long time. I heard some very good things early in my recovery, and I've held on to them. And I have talked to my clients about the fact that guilt and shame are most of the time wasted emotions, simply because guilt and shame usually center around things that have happened to us before, that we did, and then feel guilt and shame about it. All right.
Mhm.
So I turn around and I say to myself, well, I can't change the past. I can't do anything about how I felt. And at that time, if I went back, unless I knew what I know now, I would do the same thing over again. So guilt and shame to me are useless. What is helpful to me is to understand that I can make lots of mistakes, but it's my job to make new mistakes in life, right? Not the same old mistakes. And then
Neither one of us have a DeLorean where we can go back in time.
Right, exactly, and fix stuff, which would be fantastic. But you also talk about 10 statements from the foundation of guilt and from Ellis's work that I want to talk about just briefly. I need everyone's love and approval. I should do everything well. And if something bad happens, I should worry about it. Can you comment on those and what happens to the mind of an active addict?
We get ensnared in this idea of shoulds and this litany of shoulds that we heap upon ourselves, that these are the things we should do, as if people without the disease can do these things magically. So we get snared up in this, and especially put extra pressure on ourselves in that early phase of recovery, like you were talking about, that post-acute stage, 1, 2, 3 years after you've sobered up. These are the things that we trap ourselves into. One of the things is, if something bad happens, I should be able to fix it. And part of that comes from my man card, thinking that I have to fix everything. But we don't necessarily need to fix everything. We need to accept life where we're at as being this exact place where we're supposed to be, doing the same thing, facing down what we're facing, rather than how we should be handling it. So that whole Albert Ellis has gotten a ton of great credit, and credit is due there for looking at the ways that we ensnare ourselves like this.
And no matter what, I used to think that perfectionism is something that just happened to a woman when she had to make the Thanksgiving dinner perfect or had to make something else perfect. But perfectionism is something that happens in the male psyche as well. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And it's a trap. It is absolutely a trap. It is going to, even if you don't have a substance use disorder, it's gonna scuttle a great relationship. It's going to scuttle your financial plans, because you're always striving to attain something that is unattainable. This notion of perfectionism is going to drive you physically, emotionally, financially into the ground. It's not achievable. And when you accept that, then your recovery, your long-term recovery benefits, your relationships benefit. The pressure that we put on ourselves and on the things around us to be perfect goes away. And when you take that pressure off, life's a heck of a lot more fun.
It certainly is. And I know that you suffered that relapse in 2010. And some of the things we feel, I know when I went through it as well, was I'm never going to get this. This is the way it is. It's going to be a constant cycle. And if it happens before, it happened before, it'll happen again. Can you address your thoughts around that?
It doesn't have to happen again. And that was the part of looking at statistically, it's 9 out of 10 people. I'd accept that this disease isn't going to go away. All right. There's not a magic pill. There is something within me that I can set off. So if I take better, more focus, better attention on my self-care items, the things that I need to address on a daily basis, my part of being the 9 in 10 is less, and my part in being the 1 in 10 is greater.
So, as you came out of this, and of course, we know the book has a happy ending, and I want to talk just a little bit more about that. Why do you think Every Silver Lining Has a Cloud is relatable to our readers out there? What do you want them to get?
Well, I think the book is approachable. It has a lot of, I flex a little bit of nerd muscle in there. You know, there's some technical stuff in there, but it doesn't read like a technical manual. It doesn't read like a textbook. It doesn't read like many of the things that we read in our recoveries. I pick out pieces, for example, Robert Fulghum, Everything I Needed to Learn, I Learned in Kindergarten. That book, you know, I pull pieces from all around to make sense out of something that for us at the time in a relapse doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And the other part of it, I think, the appeal of it is the personal part, the part that I shared about the loneliest place in America. That comes from me. That is my journey, and to be able to relay that part of my journey effectively and on black and white dead tree pieces of paper, I think that makes it a lot more approachable as well.
And you also have a very clever style. I enjoyed it because it was a combination of wit, a little bit of sarcasm. You have a little bit of sardonic humor, but you come across as very human and very reachable and very tangible. So I really do think you should go to Amazon. Every Silver Lining Has a Cloud. It's called Relapse and the Symptoms of Sobriety, which we talked about. And especially if you are feeling like you want to pick up and you're starting to feel those feelings like, maybe I can handle a drink. Maybe I can do this. Maybe I can manage my alcohol. Maybe I can manage my drinking or drugging. This is a book that you need to read. So in the spirit of this, as you were writing the book, did something surprise you about what you were writing? What did you get from it?
It surprised me most as I was writing it, how much I was feeling the feelings that I was putting on the page. It was like, I'm crying a little bit. I felt the emotion, even though it was in the rear view mirror kind of things. I felt that. And that was what surprised me a lot. And also in doing some of the research into the studies that have done, clinical studies that have been done about this drug, alcohol, mind-blowing that A, there was this volume of information out there that we don't hear about, and B, that this substance is the most lethal one we have on this planet. Yet I can go 2 blocks in any direction and I can pick it up in aisle 6 of the store. So I mean, the mind-numbing power of this drug is and what it does to ordinarily healthy human tissues. This is a carcinogen. I didn't know that. They didn't talk about that on a Budweiser commercial.
No, they didn't. And I'm really glad that you're bringing this to our attention, because we all tend to minimize alcoholism, and people that are looking at, especially their children, saying, he just drinks a little bit and this is a phase. That's not something that is to be taken lightly, for sure. So we have about a minute. So I want to wrap up with you. Number one, what are you doing now? What are your projects? I know you're coaching. So talk a little bit about the coaching briefly. Tell us where we can find you.
Well, the coaching I've kind of put on the back burner temporarily while I am working for the Grove Estate, which is a dual diagnosis treatment facility in Peru, Indiana. They just opened up in February. Wonderful place. We do this. It's called a double platinum service commitment, and that really struck home to me as a person in long-term recovery that this is the way we need to be treating people in recovery and the ones who are starting their journey. The coaching is a very important part of my own recovery, chicagorecoverycoach.com. And the books, I've got a couple in the works, alcohologist.com is where I'm going to be providing updates on the next book as we get a little closer.
Scott, thank you so much for joining us today. The book is Every Silver Lining Has a Cloud. You can find this and Scott's other 4 books on Amazon.com. This is Ellen Stewart, the Pushy Broad from the Bronx. Go to my website, pushybroadfromthebronx.com. I'll give you all the information you need and make an appointment with me if you'd like. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time. This is Ellen Stewart, the Pushy Broad from the Bronx, saying thanks for listening. And remember, everybody needs a little push.
From the pushy broad from the